when you start to work with a business owner who knows their business, I mean, they're in their business every single day. When you bring the element of the financial story to the table, it's their financial story. It's their story. They know it. They just haven't seen it in numbers yet.
Welcome to Secret Ops, the podcast uncovering the world of operations, one episode at a time. I'm your host, Ariana Cafone, and today's guest is Tim Bynum, founder of Anchor Financial Services, which provides bookkeeping to many businesses. But in addition to that, Tim also works as a fractional chief financial officer. Now, this conversation is quite interesting because not only is Tim bringing in a wealth of knowledge around finances and financial operations, but he's also a client of mine. So I worked with him to build a custom operating system for his business so that we could essentially get it to scale really beautifully. So not only do we touch on his knowledge when it comes to financials within a business, but we also talk about why he cared about building that operating system and what we did to make it happen. I adore Tim, and I think you will as well. So let's just jump right in. You and I have a very fun dynamic that we can talk about, which is I work for you as an operator. So you have kindly said that you come on to Secret Ops. So now I can not only pick your brain, but also talk about how financial operations and business operations fit together into this really beautiful, yummy puzzle piece. So thank you for your generosity.
Yeah, thank you. This is great.
Now, you've been on both sides as an entrepreneur, and you've also worked for other businesses. What made you take the leap going from working within a business to building your own business?
Yeah, I think honestly, the biggest thing for me was the time had come for me and my wife to start a family. And so we looked at it as an opportunity to start our own thing, mainly for, the freedom of what we wanted to do with our family and the time commitment. But then also, I've always had this burning desire to create something of my own. I just didn't know what that opportunity would look like until I got into my professional career and started helping small business owners and small businesses that I worked for. And I thought, man, there's not a better opportunity out there really to help small business owners than in the financial world. And that was my expertise, was really understanding their financials and the money behind it, the flow of money through a small business and what that really means. And then translating that to an owner that's not necessarily all the time in the finances or might not know exactly what they're looking at when they're looking at a financial report. And then just being that rock of foundation, that financial foundation, that source of really good information to help their business grow.
As an operator, I have to understand financials, but I cannot translate them the way that you can. And you definitely have that skill of being able to look at the numbers and then be able to say, here's what this means, and connecting it to people that can't do that translation. Where did you pick that up from? Was that something that you had at an early age? Was it a muscle that you built?
Yeah, that's really interesting you asked that, because the very first like bookkeeping type job that I had was with my dad's church, of all things. So we grew up in a small town. My dad was a pastor there. And when I went to school for accounting and he realized what I was going to do with that, he's like, oh yeah, by the way, will you look into this and help me out with the church? And then he was taking that information and going, once a month to the church for a business meeting, to talk about the church finances. That's when it kind of started to click for me. Like, man, there's a story behind these numbers and what's happening. And I just fell in love with that. And then when I went to college, I did an internship with the FDIC. So I took a whole semester off and I went to examine banks. And I'll never forget one of the coaches that I had on a bank examination. He had me reviewing these documents. He's had me analyzing like what the prior bank examination report was. And then he was like, okay, so can you come up with your own analysis from then to now? And I was horrible at it. Like I didn't even know what I was like. It was like Greek to me. But he sat me down and he goes, okay, and he read each sentence and he goes, now this is what this means. And it was like reading all these financial statements and documentation and notes and reading between the lines. And I was like, this is fascinating. So anyway, after that, I was hooked. And I was like, I love business. I love finances. And it's all about telling stories and relationships. And it just went from there.
A story makes you want to listen. Right? When you're looking at financials, I'm going to be real, unless you're looking at your profit or your revenue, everything else you don't really want to look at that much, right?
Right.
But you're
Yeah.
right. There's stories in that. There's stories in how profitability has changed or how your cost of goods are changing. And all of those things ultimately are coming back to human decisions or how society is working. Like we've talked about how certain industries, when they have peaks and when they have valleys, you read all of that in their financials. So when you are translating for people that you're working with, what is the most important piece that you're trying to convey with them? Is it the impact? Is it the future of what the impact of today could be? What would you say maybe are like the top one or two things that you want to make sure that person is walking away with?
When you start to work with a business owner who knows their business, I mean, they're in their business every single day. When you bring the element of the financial story to the table, it's their financial story. It's their story. They know it. They just haven't seen it in numbers yet or in dollar amounts yet. And so, what I always try to do is get them to interact with those financials in a way mentally that just connects them to the numbers or connects them to the dollar amounts. So the biggest thing honestly is just helping them through the financials like a story and helping them understand from a whole. And then just honestly when I get into a meeting with a business owner, I want to I want to get validation from the report from them because they are in it day in day out. They know, yes, I spent way more on payroll this month, or we had this overhead expense, or this is out of the ordinary. They know that stuff, but if they can bring that into the story of the financials, then it validates the financials one, and then it also gives them insights to connect the actual day to day task of the business to dollar amounts on a page.
Yeah. It's about being intentional behind those decisions, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurship, and you know this, is going off your gut. You could be looking at data, you could be so into charts and all of that, but ultimately, sometimes you just got to make a call and do the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got a business owner that has a gut feeling about making a decision, whether it may be maybe they're opening up a new location, or maybe they're closing down a second location, or the next new hire for them, whatever that gut feeling is, then it's playing that gut feeling out through the numbers, then to validate whether hey that's a good decision or that was a bad decision because that's what business is, right? It's always going to be small business owners are always going to have the best um, like feel for their business.
You balance both worlds because you are an entrepreneur, but you are also incredibly financially oriented. So you are constantly doing that naturally with your own business. Where would you say is like the first step to do that? Is it just like looking at the basic numbers? Is it getting a piece of software involved? Is it talking to somebody to hash out those feelings? Like where would be the first step?
For us, we want to look at trends. So we look at month over month. If a business owner is like really wanting to know what is the next step I take, we want to look at past history financials month over month, as far, even as far back as we can go, and start to tell the story of the decisions made up to that point. And then that just gives so much clarity into what the future might look like if he makes certain decisions after that.
I'm thinking in my own situation, I've been on my own now for 2 years as a fractional COO, and the months have been a roller coaster, man. I mean, as you know, emotions are so much tied up in the money of a business, right? Like you don't even realize it sometimes, and in that push and pull. And what I felt in the first couple months versus what I feel now sometimes is the same. But then when I look back at the historical data, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a million miles away from where I was 2 years ago. And,
Yeah.
and that's also a beautiful thing to look back on. It's not just to say, okay, we made these decisions, here's where we're seeing the impact, but also to say, hey, we started out with like next to nothing. And here's where we are today, where we can actually talk about this. Like there's sort of beauty in looking back to be able to look forward. Again, the
Yeah.
storytelling of financials.
Yeah, absolutely. And you think about you entrepreneurs, small business owners, in every single day is a challenge. I mean, you wake up and you think, you've got all these things on your plate to do, all these decisions to make. If you're not careful, you become so into the weeds that it's hard to take a step back and look at the whole, or look at like what you've accomplished. And I'll say honestly, Ariana, that's one of the things you've helped me as a business owner look at is, yes, I mean, here's all the issues we have today, but look at like look at how far we've come so far. And it'll kind of take me back a little bit, like to, oh my gosh, you're right. So we are on the right track. But as a business owner, you've got to balance that to some degree. You've got to know, man, I've got to make those hard decisions every single day. But at the same time, we are still trending up, right? It might be like a slow trend, but we're trending up, and that's what matters. It's just hard to see it if you're dug into the weeds so much.
Yeah, sometimes after our one-on-ones, the homework will be go on a date night with your wife
Yeah,
and celebrate this month.
yeah,
Yeah. It is very hard, I think, for entrepreneurs to celebrate a success because it always is on to the next thing. But you're right, you do need to have those moments where you pause and listen, I can't do that for myself. I rely on my partner to do that for me. And I do that for you. And that's kind of you need those people to make you wake up to how things are and I'm happy I can do that for you and
yeah,
grateful that we've been able to work together for I guess close to 2 years now. Time flies pretty
yeah.
fast.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to ask you, so we started working together. You had a very unique project, which was, hey, I want to create this custom operating system for my business. And I want to do it on a platform called Coda. Can you build that for me? And so we set out on to create this like custom build for you to run the business on, which is now, I would say, like one of my magnum opuses.
It
um,
should be, and it should
it,
be.
it was amazing though because you saw that you needed to streamline what you were doing at that stage in the business, and you made a conscious effort for that to be one of your main objectives for the year is to operationalize the business. I think that is so rare. Where did that feeling come from? Where did that knowledge come from? And why did you put the effort and the resource to do that?
It all began from my first job out of college, honestly. They hired me to become a bookkeeper. That's what they sold to me. I said, okay, I'm in. But when I got there, very quickly I realized they not only needed bookkeeping or financial support, they needed financial operations support. Like, I mean, the whole thing was a mess. It was a disaster. It was something that I jumped right into, and I never looked back. And I thought, okay, this is really neat because not only am I organizing the finances on the back end, but I'm also speaking into the way the money flows from the very beginning into this business and then out to the vendors or out to the employees and stuff. They go hand in hand. I mean, and you can't operate one without the other. And then every position that I took after that in my career, my professional career, it was the same. So when I started my own business, I took that approach with Anchor as well. It wasn't easy because we started out with managing our work on, as you can imagine, an Excel spreadsheet, right? Just like, or
I swear, the world of the small businesses are run on Excel or
that's right.
Google
Yeah.
Sheets. It's
That's
true. It is. It just
yeah.
is.
And then we start growing and we're like, oh man, maybe we need like a project management tool or something. So we tried one and we just weren't quite there. It wasn't giving us all the pieces that we needed because we'd have some of it in that and some of it in our emails and some of it, I mean, it was all over. And I would say, okay, we're not going to do that tool anymore. We're going to use this tool. And I probably did that 3 or 4 times. And luckily, I mean, the employees stayed with me during the time because it was awful. But we always had this feeling of what we really wanted and needed to do our work for our clients, but we could never really find the full tool to actually bring it about. And so that's why I had been acquainted with Coda.io for a little while, and that's what led me to you to build out our operating system in that from the ground up, from scratch.
It was such a fun process, and it really is such a discovery process. One of my
Yeah.
favorite moments is when there were two things that we were figuring out: how we wanted to manage tasks, and we wanted there to be enough structure where we were prescriptive on the type of tasks, but we also wanted there to be enough flexibility where people could communicate and transfer tasks, and we could iterate on things. And in figuring out this like list of tasks that you and your team does, it became this like North Star of like, oh my God, you guys are doing a ton of stuff. But also it became really clear, okay, this is all that we're doing. And that's where another piece I loved working on that was so challenging was the monthly closeout process, because that
Yes.
is so vital with
Yeah.
financial operation. To build that took us quite a time. But what I love about it now, I mean, got it.
Yeah.
It's just now in motion.
Yeah.
It's like this machine that just compounds and scales. And I even looked at how many tasks the other day. Tim, you and I were looking, and there was over like 9,000 completed tasks that your team have done 2 years, which was unbelievable. Like, it was so exciting to see.
It's crazy.
It's a ton of work. You guys are doing so much. And that is a tiny way to quantify that work and that
Yeah.
value that you're bringing, but really cool to see.
Yeah. It was awesome. I feel like that operating system, once we got it nailed down and created and then operational, I believe it's probably one of our best. It's one of our best advantages as a company. Like not that we're out there like saying, it's better than anything else out there, but for us, it it is night and day difference in managing our client work. We can onboard employees or contractors that want to help us into that operating system. In it just everything flows so nice, and that monthly closeout process is kind of like my brainchild of like how I look at financials, and like if it were my business, how I'd want to close out those financials every month. And we just translated that into a really nice like operational task oriented system with context behind it, so that the next CFO we hire or whatever comes on, they've got it. They can learn from day one, on how to be an effective CFO for a client.
Well, the cool thing too, so you've got, your team that really is fantastic. You've got Benjamin on the team, and him and I would be in these calls, like essentially trying to download your brain. But it was beautiful because what happened in that is that we would ask you, what does that mean? What does that look like? And in doing that, it was really clarifying, not just from like a how do you do the thing, but strategically, how do we manage clients? And I think that's where building out financial operations and also managing your clients and people, they really go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And then once you sort of build out that prototype that, Benjamin and I were stress testing, then you get that to the greater team, to Crystal and other folks on the team. And then they really test that at scale and at a place of volume. And that's another breaking point where we need to assess and make sure that we've hit the right things.
The when we cracked the idea of creating this from scratch, right? The team's like, "Oh my gosh, are you serious? Like, are we really going to go down this path and try to do this?" But yet now I would say the team is very protective of this. At times I wonder, man, do we create a monster here that we can't get out of? But I mean, it works beautifully, so I'm not going to probably ever change anything. But it's just we did create kind of a monster there. So
We did. It's amazing when I think about it. It always starts like this way. You centralize the data, you structure the data, and then as the time goes on, it just becomes more and more and more. And it is this like wonderful Frankenstein machine. But I did want to ask you one specific question again for our listeners out there. I think one of your superhero powers is connecting finance and education together. What would you say are the short term, medium term, and the long term ways to learning how to be financially literate in your business?
uh, I think spending some time in your books and understanding kind of how just general financials and general bookkeeping work, You don't have to get into the weeds. And honestly, if you could just carve out a little bit of time to just understand a little bit, you could easily Google stuff. You can watch videos. There's a lot of resources out there about this, but just having that basic understanding, that little bit, it'll take you a long way. And that's very helpful. If you're wanting to get more and more involved into it, then I encourage small business owners to have monthly financial check-ins. If you can get into a rhythm of monthly check-ins with whoever's doing your books, or if it's you, then carve out have your own business meeting by yourself. It's really strange to say, but like carve out the time to look at your finances once a month and really kind of dig in to understand your story of what those numbers are telling you. And then long term, I would say if you really want to learn long term is to find an advocate like us, or like a CPA who's willing to talk about what's going into those numbers, or a fractional CFO, or even an internal person, and like really kind of get into their world to some degree to understand what they're doing and why. But the biggest thing I think right now in small businesses and owners who are trying to understand their finances is just consistency of being involved in that world. And you don't have to spend a lot of time, but just a little bit of time consistently, monthly, is the key to me. Yeah, I mean, that's what we see. Is it really makes a big difference.
I'm going to recap this because I think it was
Okay.
so good. I'm going to recap how good it is. Short term, get into your books.
Yeah.
Google what a line item is. What does that mean? Figure out what is totaling up into those different line items of your books and just understand how those things are connected. You don't have to understand from a granular perspective, but a high level, know what the word means and what's going into that. Then, second step, medium term, get those reoccurring meetings on the books to review your financials. Even if you're the only person in your business, just make sure you're spending time, carving out time to look at the books and not avoid the books. That's
Yeah.
important.
Yeah.
And then the third piece is at some point, bring in the advocate to help you translate more complex business decisions or help translate where you want to go next strategically with the business through that financial lens. And I do think, Tim, like as a fractional COO, it's like dating. You got to find the right match for you. And the most important thing is when you hop on a call with somebody, they should be able to speak through your lens, and
Right.
it shouldn't feel like you're trying to understand another language. They should be able to translate those stories or take those questions and be able to answer them,
That's
which
absolutely.
again, I've seen you do so beautifully, but that should be something that you should look for in those relationships, is that ability to connect with that person and to have them understand what you need.
That's right. Yeah, you want somebody who is curious and very interested in what you're doing, and try to get it down and understand it. Well, the first conversation I have with every potentially new client of ours is more geared towards them, what they're doing. We want to understand their story and how they built what they're building. Like this advocate needs to be exactly that, an advocate for you and for what you're trying to build and do.
We need a part 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Let's do it.
But I do want to wrap up with some rapid fire questions to learn about you as a human being. So the first question is, what is your favorite part of the day?
Morning.
Why?
Um, it's quiet.
Full stop.
Yeah, yeah, that's all you need.
The next question, which is, what is something that makes you little kid happy?
So, college basketball might be one of those. Like, I love college basketball. It takes me back to the days when I used to play, but not college ball, but like high school ball. But yeah, I can't wait for college basketball season.
What is an important lesson you've learned so far in your life?
I would say that there's always two sides to every story.
That's a good
Um,
one.
yeah, you just you start to realize that everybody is coming from different perspectives and different angles, and you should just be nice to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. Um, Last question, which is, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Oh gosh. I want to be a college basketball coach is what I want to be right now.
I can start calling you coach just to get you, revved up for it. We'll work on
Yeah.
that. Tim, you're such a joy. If people are listening and they're saying, "Oh my God, I want to follow Tim. I want to see what he's up to," where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Tim Bynum, Anchor Financial Services on LinkedIn as well. And then our website is anchorfs.co. And you can find our company website there.
Fantastic. Tim, you're the best. Thanks again for your time and for your brain. Secret Ops listeners, thank you so much for listening. Please remember to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts or on YouTube if you're a visual learner like me. And we will see you next time. Bye.